Okay, I'm gonna level with you. It's now the middle of August, and not many of you will know this, but that means it's nearly September. And we all know what's happening in September, don't we? That's right, it's the merge. It feels like it's come right out of the blue, doesn't it? They've had months. They've known about it. They've talked about it for years. Okay, fine. So not really out of the blue then. Nonetheless, there are still some last-minute preparations taking place right now. It seems the big guys finally want in. It could be good news for you if you hold Ethereum, or if you don't. We'll tell you why in just a second. There's less good news though for Ethereum's incoming proof of work fork. ETHPoW had been buzzing, but it might just have been swatted out of the sky. We'll have more details for you on that shortly as well. Plus, crypto career changes, increasingly all the rage, but you know what's big? Not quite as big as it was though, crypto crime. So the merge is just a few weeks away, and it looks like institutional money wants in, finally. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME, is expanding its offerings to keep up with that. Options are now going to be made available for Ethereum futures traded on the CME from September 12th. That is just 3 days before the blockchain finally switches to proof of stake. In a statement, CME's Tim McCourt said the new Ether options will offer its clients, well, more options. But how big a deal is this exactly? Well, we have borrowed Justin Donathan from Amber Group very briefly to tell us more. Justin, exactly what does this CME move mean?
So with regards to the CME move to add Ethereum options, actually the Ether options were already existing along with the Bitcoin futures and options, but just in micro size. And now they've been upgraded, or rather there's an alternative option of full-sized Ether options, which represent each contract is about 50 Ether. So it's a significant or chunky size. At the current market price, it's around between 75K and 100K, depending on where Ether is trading. And so that's going to give the ability to institutional larger funds to play, in that market and take some more, let's say, structured views of the market, as opposed to just working with futures, right? We just have that maturity date, but don't give you the option to select the strike price, so the price level at which you'd be called upon for your option.
Yeah, ETH's price, meanwhile, down over the week. Didn't we think that things were going to keep going up pre-merge?
With regards to the price of Ethereum right now, no surprises there. 2000 or that 2K mark was always a strong resistance. So I think a lot of sophisticated players anticipated some kind of pullback as we reached or got close to that level. I don't think it's really fundamental driven, as in I don't think something has changed massively in the crypto space or with regards to Ether and the upcoming merge. I just think it's a natural price reaction, and also maybe to a certain extent macro driven, as in other risk assets, in traditional assets have pulled back a bit because the bull run exhausts itself a little bit, and inflation is still quite high, and the messaging from the Fed is still quite hawkish.
Not everyone on board with this switch to POS. Of course, the Ethereum POW fork not looking quite as rosy as it had been previously, though. The buzz for the would-be token seems to have fizzled somewhat. CoinMarket data shows ETHPoW's price down to around $50 from its high of around 140. So, Justin, does this spell doom for Ethereum's proof of work fork?
So the Ethereum proof of work coin that is listed, I think, on two exchanges right now, or at least on Poloniex, and might be listed already or will be listed on BitMEX. This is essentially a token with the expectation that there will be a fork and that you will have the Ethereum proof of stake and the Ethereum proof of work. The fact that it's gone down from the previous highs, I don't think it means that the market isn't anticipating a fork. I think most market participants expect it to happen, but it's more about the valuation of the token that will come from the fork, which is, let's look at the Ethereum proof of work network as it stands now, and the fact that most most solutions that exist on Ethereum now have committed to working on proof of stake and not on proof of work. So I don't think the pricing is based on the expectation that a fork will or will not happen, but more about how do you value the proof of work network for Ethereum after a successful transition to proof of stake. And the thing that's interesting to note here is that all the infrastructure we're benefiting from on the current Ethereum blockchain will still be there, but then all the activity, or a big chunk of the activity at least, will be gone because USDC, because wrapped Bitcoin, because Aave, because synthetics, and so on.
All right, Justin, thanks. Justin Donathan from Amber Group talking to us there. Now, it's been a tough year so far for crypto prices, ETHPoW included, and while that's shaken investor confidence, what has it really done to crypto criminals? That's the real question, of course, isn't it? A new report from blockchain data platform Chainalysis has found that while some forms of illicit crypto activity are actually way down, others, maybe worryingly, are on the increase. So what's going on really, and why is there such a difference between these different types of crypto crime? Well, Forkast's Lachlan Keller has the details.
Overall, transaction volumes for both legitimate and illicit entities were lower in the first half of this year than they were in the same time period in 2021. However, while criminal activities fell 15% year on year, legitimate volumes were down 36%. Digging further into specific crimes, Chainalysis found that scams and darknet activity fell, but hacking and stolen funds actually rose. The number of individual transfers to scams so far this year is the lowest it's been in the past 4 years. Chainalysis told Forkast that, on the whole, scammers are being forced to change their methods.
Before, you could just spin up a Bitcoin site and say, we will XXX your money. Just give us your money, lock it up. We're gonna, every day you'll get XXX. And people, because of the FOMO, would maybe fall for that. And that's never gonna go away to some degree. But people are largely wising up to the fact through advocacy, such as the work you're doing now and the work that a lot of journalists have done around the world to raise awareness around crime. People are wising up.
Raoul warns of one of the new techniques scammers are trying.
They're moving into something called pig butchering, which is basically, I don't like the term, but it's where you spend a long time on one target. Typically, a romance scam is a good example of pig butchering, and you spend weeks and months trying to convince someone to fall for your scam rather than just throwing up a website and the money comes.
Darknet revenue is also down significantly. However, it had been on the increase until April. So what changed? Chainalysis says that's almost certainly due to the shutdown and sanctioning of the Russia-based Hydra marketplace. While overall revenue fell after that, other marketplaces have seen an uptick in the number of incoming transfers since.
Those people have to go somewhere. There's a phenomenon not just in crypto crime, but in crime in general, where, law enforcement efforts work to some degree, but a lot of times they just have a displacement effect, and they or the whack-a-mole problem, where a lot of users, there's a lot of options for different darknet marketplaces to use. So those that were using Hydra might choose to use a different platform now.
It's another story where hacks are concerned. By July this year, a whopping $1.9 billion had been stolen against just $1.2 billion at the same point last year. Much of that increase came from the DeFi space. Grau says the incredible pace of growth there has caused issues.
We're seeing many new businesses opening up their doors. And those businesses, because the code is open source, sometimes can just copy and paste the code behind the platform. And so we saw an escalation in the number of DeFi protocols that kind of came after the peak. And a lot of those had cybersecurity risks and had vulnerabilities. So the pot of the number of vulnerable points grew, and not to mention, as we scale onto other blockchains, which is something that's happened really in the past year, the vulnerabilities that come with bridges that are trying to create interoperability.
So what's being done to tackle these problems? Grau says there's been a lot of positive steps from law enforcement recently.
Whereas maybe last year, a lot of law enforcement agencies and government agencies around the world tended to have that one kind of crypto nerd in the basement that would run their investigations. Now they've expanded their forces. They've grown their crypto forensics and blockchain analysis capabilities. And we've seen a lot of successes sanctioning crackdowns against scams, closures of darknet marketplaces, finding major ransomware criminals and locking them up and seizing major funds and making ransomware a major priority for the US government.
The Chainalysis report says that no matter what happens with markets, the only way to stop crimes is to shore up security and educate consumers.
You're only as strong as your weakest link. And so funds tend to find an off-ramp in either a safe haven jurisdiction or like ransomware funds. The key to crime, illicit activities, they need to find a way to cash out that crypto. So we see hotspots, jurisdictional hotspots popping up around the world that are facilitating criminal activity. So there does need to be more done in certain jurisdictions. And so that is something that we're continuing to try and tackle as an industry.
Grauer says collaboration is vital when it comes to hunting crypto criminals down. I'm Lachlan Keller, Forkast.
Now, over in South Korea, authorities there are clamping down on unregistered crypto companies, crypto crime of a sort. The country's financial intelligence unit says 16 foreign-based virtual asset service providers have been targeting Koreans without obtaining the necessary registration. Transactions with these 16 companies will now be blocked. Authorities there are also working on blocking domestic access to the websites of those firms as well. Punishment for illegal business activities by unregistered entities can be punished by a maximum of 5 years in prison and a fine of over $37,000. Not something to be sniffed at for sure. Now, imagine a world where our avatars, our identities, and the things we can do aren't restricted by locations or indeed by access. That is, of course, barely scratching the surface of what the metaverse could potentially be, and of course, the opportunities it could present us with. And that is the focus of the latest edition of Word on the Block. Forkast editor-in-chief Angie Lau has been sitting down with Sandra Helu, who is co-founder of Metapolis, to discuss all of this and more.
I think if you look at the technology that's coming out, the speed of innovation that's happening across a lot of projects is crazy. You know, you go to bed and then you wake up the next day and there's already a million projects that are saying, oh, we're innovating this and we're doing that. You know, there's no minute of rest in the space, and that's beautiful. I think for me, the main excitement comes from when mass adoption starts to slowly occur across various industries and people realize that, you know, this technology is going to improve their life. Because, you know, and just going back to the example that you gave, a lot of people fear that, you know, there's going to be cardiac arrests happening from people just purely sitting down on their computer. But again, it's the exact opposite, because the more you engage with the physical, you have the ability to unlock the digital.
Make sure you catch the full show that is out on Monday. That is it though from us for today though. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video. We've got loads of other videos. I promise you're going to love them. Let us know your thoughts as well on what's happening in the comments, and tell us what you think of what we're doing and how we can improve it, how we can make our content better tailored for you.